Urano Motosu was an ordinary girl until she was reincarnated in a town named Ehrenfest due to her life meeting an accident due to, well, surprisingly it wasn't by a train or even truck kind, it was somehow by a bunch of books. Upon waking, Urano quickly realizes two things: she's in a new world brimming with magic, and books are nearly non-existent. For a passionate reader like her, that's a disaster. Determined, she vows, if there are no books, then I'll make them myself. But as a poor girl in a society ruled by nobles, can she really bring her dream to life? The anime begins with a head priest handing Myne, a blue-haired girl, a magic circlet to wear and instructs her to drink a mysterious red potion. As soon as she drinks it, Myne drifts into a deep sleep, and the head priest begins to explore her. Her memories, to be specific, tracing back to how she first became Myne. Myne's story begins long before she takes on her new identity. In her previous life, she was Urano Motosu, a college student with an insatiable love for books. Urano's world revolved around the written world. Books were her greatest joy and passion. Which may sound boring to you, however, God had her life tragically ended in an earthquake, where she was crushed by her beloved collection of books. She had it coming for condemning her body to such a boring routine. In her final moments, her one true wish is simple: she longs to be surrounded by books in her next life. The story then shifts to Urano's rebirth as Myne, where her first conscious thought is awakening in the frail body of a 5-year-old girl. She is bedridden, suffering from a dangerously high fever, and her surroundings are foreign to her. As she looks around, a woman enters the room, speaking in an unfamiliar language. At first, Urano doesn't understand a word, but soon her memories begin to merge with those of Myne, and she realizes that this woman is her new mother, Eva. Eva gently instructs Myne to stay in bed and rest until dinner. However, Urano, now inhabiting Myne's body, can't contain her curiosity. She is desperate to find a book to read, clinging to her love of books to make sense of this new world. What a weirdo. Despite her weak and fragile condition, she begins searching for the house. To her dismay, there are no books to be found, no shelves lined with novels, no scrap of writing anywhere. The next 3 days prove to be a difficult adjustment for Myne. She slowly comes to terms with the fact that she has been reincarnated in a world completely different from her previous one. Myne's family lives in a small, dirty townhouse without any modern conveniences like plumbing or electricity. Gods really did condemn her for her boring routine, giving her a weak girl body and poor parents like yourself.
What more do you want from me?
Despite the unfamiliarity, Myne's new family showers her with love and care. Her parents, though poor, are warm-hearted and affectionate. Myne's sister, Turi, is particularly kind, and at one point, she helps Myne make a hair stick so she can tie back her long hair. Once Myne recovers from her fever, her curiosity about the world outside their home only intensifies. She asks to accompany her mother to the lower city market, eager to explore this new environment and, most importantly, to find a library or bookstore where she can immerse herself in books once again. Myne walks through the bustling stalls. She notices that there is no written language anywhere, no signs, no books, nothing but the occasional numbers used to price goods. Things take a turn for the worse when Myne witnesses the realities of a medieval-style market. As they pass by the butcher's stalls, she is horrified by the sight of raw, butchered meat hanging outdoors. The scene becomes too much for her to bear, especially when she sees a live chicken being slaughtered right in front of her. So, in sum total, she got the weakest body she could get, poorest parents along with a weak mind too. The shock overwhelms her and she faints on the spot. After regaining consciousness, Myne finds herself still determined to find something that resembles a book. While waiting for her mother to finish her shopping, she strikes up a conversation with a local merchant. To her amazement, she spots something incredible behind the merchant's counter, a book locked away in a case. Her heart leaps with excitement and she begs to read it. However, the merchant is quick to explain that books in this world are not like the mass-produced items she knew in her previous life. A commoner like her would never be allowed to handle one so easily. Undeterred by this setback, Myne's resolve only strengthens. If she cannot buy or borrow a book, she makes a bold decision. With unwavering determination in her eyes, she declares, "If I can't buy books, I'll just have to make them myself." Pretty impressive for a girl who can't even walk for long, I must say. Myne's new life as a commoner continues to be full of challenges. Her frail health constantly hinders her, but her mind is sharp, excluding the fainting at blood sighting, and her passion for books keeps her motivated. One day, Myne's older sister, Turi, returns from foraging in the woods. She brings home a peculiar fruit called a merle, which resembles an avocado. The sight of this unfamiliar fruit piques Myne's curiosity, and she wonders how she can make use of it. During her previous life as Urano, she had a vast amount of knowledge about everyday items and how they could be repurposed, so she began to experiment with the merle fruit. After some trial and error, she discovers how to extract oil from the fruit, sparking an idea. Myne uses oil to make homemade shampoo, an item that does not seem to exist in this world. When she tries the shampoo for the first time, the results are astonishing. Her hair, which had been dull and lifeless, becomes glossy and sweet-smelling. Her success with the shampoo doesn't go unnoticed. Both her sister Turi and her mother Eva are amazed by the transformation in Myne's hair. Eager to experience the same effect, they quickly ask Myne to make more for them. Not long after this, Myne and Turi are given another task, to deliver lunch to their father, Gunther, who works as a soldier at the city gate. Myne, however, is still weak from her recurring illnesses, and walking long distances is difficult for her. Her determination to help her family, however, outweighs her physical limitations, and she sets out with Turi to make the delivery. As they make their way to the gate, Myne begins to tire, but fortunately, a group of neighborhood boys, Ralph, Faye, and Lutz, come across them. Seeing Myne struggle, the boys volunteer to help, offering to carry her the rest of the way. Ralph, one of the boys, compliments Turi on how nice her hair looks, which amuses Myne. What a load of simps. However, when Lutz, another boy, compliments Myne's own hair, she is caught completely off guard. Flustered by the unexpected praise, she blushes and finds herself at a loss for words. When they finally reach the city gate, Gunther greets his daughters with warmth and affection. He praises them for their help and is visibly proud of both Myne and Turi. During this visit, Gunther introduces them to Otto, a fellow soldier who works alongside him. Otto is different from most of the other townspeople in one important way. He can read and write. For Myne, this discovery is monumental. Seeing Otto use parchment and ink, items she hasn't seen since her previous life, sparks an immediate and intense excitement within her. She eagerly asks her father to buy her some parchment and ink so she can begin writing again. However, Gunther's response dashes her hopes. He explains that the cost of parchment and ink is prohibitively expensive, so much so that buying even a small amount would cost him an entire month's salary. Seeing her disappointment, Otto steps in as a knight in shining armor to lift her spirits. He tells Myne that while he can't give her parchment, he can offer something else, a second-hand stone slate. It's not as glamorous or convenient as paper, but it's a start. He also promises to teach her how to read and write using the alphabet of this world, an offer that fills Myne with hope and excitement. Even though it's not parchment, the slate represents the first step toward rekindling her love for reading and writing in this new life. As winter approaches, the town prepares for the cold season with a traditional event known as the Pork Stocking Festival. It's a time when commoners gather to slaughter pigs, preparing bacon and sausages to last through the winter months. For Myne, this festival becomes yet another difficult moment in her adjustment to the gritty realities of life in this world. When she witnesses the slaughtering of the pigs, the sight of the blood makes her feel faint and queasy, just as it had when she saw the butcher in the marketplace. Her family quickly notices her distress and decides to take her back to the city gate, where Otto helps her recover. While she rests, Otto keeps his promise and gives her the stone slate he had mentioned. True to his words, he begins teaching her how to write her name in the new world's alphabet. She quickly adapts to this new writing style using her nerdy bookish skills. She also learns to write a plethora of other phrases and starts to learn the new language rapidly. However, she can't forget her old language and writes her name and the names of her companions in her old language. However, as she is just a weak nerd, all this writing has a toll on her weak, frail body, and she faints again. I feel like this fainting is gonna be a frequent thing in this anime. Anyhow, she is transported back to her home and is allowed to rest. 2 months have passed since Urano's memories awoke in Myne, and at that time, Myne gradually adjusted to her new reality. As winter sets in, the town of Ehrenfest is blanketed in cold, and life for commoners like Myne's family shifts into a slower, more isolated rhythm. The harsh winter makes it difficult to leave the house, so the family spend most of their days indoors, focusing on winter handiwork to pass the time and prepare for the seasons ahead. Myne, eager to stay productive and continue her quest to make books, tries to contribute to the family's efforts. Along with her mother Eva, her father Gunther, and her older sister Turi, Myne helps with a variety of tasks like sewing and basket making. These traditional winter activities are essential for the family's survival, and Myne begins to see just how much work goes into maintaining a household in this world. However, her mind is always on her true goal, creating books. Desperate to make some kind of progress toward this dream, Myne decides to experiment with a new idea. She tries to use the fibers from reeds to make papyrus, hoping that this will be her first step toward producing something like paper. She enlists Turi's help, and the two girls work together to gather and process the reeds. However, the task proves to be far more difficult and time-consuming than Myne anticipated. Despite their best efforts, the work progresses at a painfully slow pace. After 3 days of frustration, Myne realizes that this method won't work, at least not during the harsh winter. Reluctantly, she decides to give up on making papyrus for now, resolving to try making clay tablets when the weather improves in the spring. During their winter routine, Turi brings home a batch of parus, a fruit that ripens during the colder months. The paru has a sweet, juicy pulp, and harvesting its juice becomes a welcome distraction for the two sisters. Together, they carefully squeeze out the juice. However, as they process the fruit, Myne notices something surprising. The leftover pulp, which has a texture like soy, is typically discarded as animal feed. It seems like a waste to Myne, who immediately begins to think of ways to make better use of the paru's byproducts. Myne's chance to experiment comes in when our two neighborhood boys visit to buy some extra animal feed. These boys, like many in the town, come from families that struggle during the winter months when food is scarce. Myne, always resourceful, decides to turn the paru's pulp into something more edible. She mixes the pulp with other ingredients and creates a batch of paru cakes, a simple but delicious treat that is both filling and nutritious. The boys are delighted by the unexpected snack, their faces lighting up with joy as they taste something different from the usual winter fare. Lutz, who is always impressed by Myne's cleverness and ingenuity, offers his help for the future. He tells her that whenever she needs assistance with anything, she can count on him. As winter drags on, Myne finds herself running out of pencils for her stone slate, which she uses to practice writing. Remembering that Otto, her father's colleague at the city gate, had given her the slate, she asks Gunther if she can visit him to get more pencils. However, Gunther is a bit jealous of Myne's admiration for Otto. Gunther dislikes the idea of his daughter visiting the gate just to see Otto and flatly tells her that she can't go back until spring, when the weather improves. When both Turi and Eva leave the next day to harvest more parus, Gunther has no choice but to take Myne with him to the city gate. Myne eagerly brings her slate along and continues to practice writing the alphabet. As she sits by Otto, she notices something unusual in the paperwork he's working on. Myne, being a natural observer and quick learner, spots a mistake in Otto's accounting. She points out the error, catching Otto by surprise. Impressed by her sharpness and attention to detail, Otto sees an opportunity. He asks Myne if she would be willing to help him with his paperwork, which is often tedious and time-consuming. In exchange for her assistance, he promises her an unlimited supply of slate pencils and offers to continue teaching her how to read and write in the new world's alphabet. For Myne, this is an irresistible offer. With her thirst for knowledge and her love for reading and writing, she eagerly agrees to help. Back at home, Myne's creative mind remains as active as ever. With Turi's baptism ceremony approaching, Myne is determined to make her sister a special gift. Baptism is a significant event in this world, and Myne wants to contribute to Turi's outfit in a meaningful way. Remembering some of her old crafting skills, Myne talks her father into making her a crochet hook. With the hook in hand, she works diligently to create a beautiful decorative flower hair ornament, something that will perfectly complement Turi's baptism outfit. When Myne presents the gift to her sister, Turi is overjoyed. As spring arrives in Ehrenfest, Myne is eager to resume her ambitious plans. She has been waiting all winter for this moment, and her excitement is palpable as she announces her intention to head to the forest to make clay tablets. Creating clay tablets feels like the next logical step in her quest to bring books into this world, but her family is less enthusiastic about the idea. They are all too aware of her fragile health, and Myne's father, Gunther, is especially protective. Gunther insists that Myne focuses on building her stamina and improving her overall health before embarking on such a task. Foraging in the forest requires energy and endurance, both of which Myne still lacks. He forbids her from going foraging until he is satisfied with her progress, reminding her that her well-being must come first. Disappointed but not discouraged, Myne accepts his decision, though her determination to carry out her plan remains unwavering. In the meantime, Gunther suggests a different way for Myne to stay productive, working as Otto's unofficial assistant. Otto has already been teaching her to read and write, and Gunther sees this as an opportunity for her to gain valuable experience, potentially paving the way for her to become a clerk someday. Although this isn't directly related to making books, Myne sees the value in continuing her education and agrees to the arrangement. For several weeks, Myne follows this new routine. Each day, she walks to and from the city gate with Lutz and Turi, both of whom are always willing to lend a hand or keep her company. At the gate, she works as Otto's assistant, helping with paperwork and learning more about clerical duties. In her spare time, she practices reading and writing with the apprentice soldiers, honing her skills with their help. Gradually, she begins to build up her stamina, and eventually, she becomes strong enough to walk to the forest without tiring out, something that once seemed impossible to her. Just when it seems like things are finally falling into place, disaster strikes. Myne suddenly falls ill with the condemning fever of hers, a recurring issue that has plagued her since she first awakened in this world for leading such a boring life in her previous world. Despite her best efforts, she is bedridden for the remainder of the spring. The timing couldn't be worse, and Myne is devastated by the setback. Her dreams of making clay tablets are once again put on hold, and she is forced to spend weeks recuperating. When she eventually recovers, her father, seeing how eager she is to go to the forest, relents and gives her permission to join the other children. However, he makes her promise not to overexert herself and insists that she spend the day resting in the forest rather than foraging or working. Myne, determined not to delay her plans any longer, agrees, but she has other ideas in mind. She secretly brings a trowel with her, intending to start digging for clay while the others are occupied. Once they reach the forest, Myne wastes no time. She quietly sneaks away from the group like the little nerd she is and begins digging for clay, knowing full well that her father wouldn't approve. Unfortunately for Myne, Lutz soon catches her in the act. Furious, Lutz confronts her, accusing her of breaking her promise and never intending to keep it in the first place. Even though he's upset, Lutz can't stay mad at Myne for long. He recognizes her stubborn determination and ultimately decides to help her. Together, they dig up enough clay and begin shaping it into tablets, working side by side to bring Myne's vision to life. As they wait for the tablets to dry, Myne takes the opportunity to explain the concept of reading and books to Lutz. Unfortunately, their progress is soon destroyed by an unforeseen accident. Faye, one of the neighborhood boys, along with another child, stomps on the clay tablets while playing, completely unaware of how important they are to Myne. Furious and heartbroken, she loses her temper in a way that she never has before. Her eyes change color, a startling transformation that frightens Faye and shocks everyone around her, including Lutz and Turi. Lutz, however, steps in to calm her down as the lover boy he is. He promises that they'll all work together to make new tablets, assuring her that they can still fix things. His calming presence helps to bring Myne back to herself, and she realizes that she doesn't have to shoulder everything on her own. Despite this, the next several days bring more disappointment. Rain pours down, soaking the drying tablets and ruining them once again. The gods really do be punishing her to the extreme. This second failure is almost too much for Myne to bear, and she breaks down in tears. Once again, Lutz is there to comfort her. He doesn't let her give up and helps her make a third set of tablets. While they work together, Lutz asks Myne about her future plans. Her answer is simple but profound. She wants to live a life surrounded by books, no matter what it takes. Lutz, in turn, opens about his own dreams, revealing that he hopes to become a traveling trader someday. Finally, the third set of tablets is finished, and Myne reflects on how far she's come since she first arrived in this world. She resolves to write down all the stories her mother told her and keep them close, preserving them for herself and for future generations. However, fate has one last cruel twist in store for Myne. When she places the completed clay tablets in her family's clay oven to bake them, disaster strikes. The heat proves too much for the fragile tablets, and they crumble and explode, destroying them completely. Myne's dream, so close to becoming a reality, is once again shattered, like her clay tablets in the oven. As summer arrives in Ehrenfest, the warm weather brings a new milestone for Myne's older sister, Turi. She is set to turn 7 this season, a significant age in their world, as it marks the time of her baptism, a rite of passage that officially welcomes her into society. The family prepares for the event with care, and Turi takes extra pride in her appearance. She uses the homemade shampoo Myne created from merle fruit, which leaves her hair glossy and fragrant. To complete the look, she proudly wears the hair ornament her sister lovingly crafted for her as a special gift. As they walk to the baptism, the neighbors can't help but notice Turi's striking appearance, showering her with compliments. The vibrant, decorative hairpiece stands out in the modest, tightly knit community, and the care that Myne put into making it for her sister is evident to all. During the baptism ceremony, Myne and her father, Gunther, don't stay long. They leave early to hurry to the city gate, where Gunther has an important meeting with Otto. While her father is engaged in the meeting, Myne takes the opportunity to continue learning and prove her usefulness. One of the soldiers stationed at the gate needs help reading an important letter from a nobleman. Myne, despite her young age, confidently steps in to assist. She not only reads the letter but also provides sound advice on how best to handle the situation, impressing the soldier with her quick thinking and knowledge. Once her father and Otto finish their meeting, she wastes no time alerting Otto to the letter's contents.
さすが俺の女子俺の娘だ
Later that evening, as the family gathers for dinner, Gunther presents Myne with a special gift, a small, sharp knife. He hands it to her with a sense of ceremony, explaining that it's now her duty to collect firewood for the family task. Myne, always resourceful and creative, immediately begins to think of other ways to use the knife. Rather than simply focusing on firewood, she decides to repurpose it for her own needs. She plans to use the knife to carve out wood tablets, known as maken, which will serve as a replacement for the clay tablets she had tried and failed to make earlier. This new idea excites her, as it brings her one step closer to creating a written record in a world that is almost devoid of books. Lutz, ever the supportive friend, or should I say more than friend, soon notices Myne at work. Seeing her dedication and knowing how much her dream means to her, Lutz offers to help. In return, he asks for a favor. He wants Myne to introduce him to Otto. Lutz has been dreaming of becoming a traveling trader, and he hopes that Otto, with his worldly knowledge and connections, might be able to provide him with valuable advice on how to make his dream a reality. When Myne introduces Lutz to Otto, the soldier is quick to dismiss Lutz's ambitions. Otto tells her bluntly that becoming a traveling trader is not a practical or suitable aspiration for a child from the city, and he should just keep focusing on getting into Myne. However, Otto agrees to meet with Lutz in person to discuss the matter further, though it's clear that Otto doesn't think the young boy's dream is feasible. In her own quest to create writing materials, Myne faces another challenge. She needs ink. She asks Otto if she can be paid in ink rather than the slate pencils she usually receives to help him. Otto laughs at the idea and explains that ink is far more expensive than Myne realizes. It would take her 3 years of work to earn enough ink for her needs. Undeterred, Myne comes up with a clever solution. She gathers soot from her family's oven and mixes it with clay to create a makeshift crayon, finding yet another way to overcome the limitations of her environment. However, Myne's challenges are far from over. When she returns home, she is devastated to discover that her mother, Eva, has unknowingly used the wood tablets she had been carving as firewood. Her frustration and disappointment bubble over, and once again, her mysterious illness takes hold. Myne's eyes change color as her fever spikes, leaving her bedridden with dangerously high temperatures. Her body seems to react violently to intense emotional distress, and this incident is no exception.
Myne が拾ってきた薪ね。それなら使ったわよ。
Seeing Myne in such a state, Lutz steps in to offer encouragement. He refuses to let her give up and brings her a different type of wood, one that is less likely to be mistaken for firewood. Inspired by his determination to help her, Myne regains her resolve. However, disaster strikes again when her mother, unaware of the importance of the new tablets, accidentally burns those as well, which in her defense, it's a reasonable crash out. This second failure hits Myne hard, and for a moment, she feels completely defeated. The combination of her illness and her frustrations over her failed projects brings her to the brink of despair. Despite everything, Myne eventually finds the strength to keep going. She remembers Lutz's words of encouragement and the promise she made to him to keep trying, no matter how difficult things get. As she resolves to persevere, her fever subsides, leaving her to wonder what kind of strange illness she has and why it seems to be linked to her emotions. Young love really does wonder in strangest of places. Once she has recovered, Myne returns to the city gate, where she reschedules her meeting with Otto. She seeks his advice, wanting to know how he would approach a project after several failed attempts. Otto, with his practical wisdom, tells her that sometimes the best solution is to hire someone with more experience to do the job and find an investor willing to fund the concept. Determined to support Lutz as much as she can, Myne prepares him for his upcoming meeting with Otto. Understanding the importance of making a good first impression, she washes his hair with her homemade shampoo, leaving it glossy and clean. She also advises him to wear his best clothes for the occasion, knowing that appearance and presentation can make all the difference in such a professional setting. The day of the meeting arrives, and to Myne's surprise, Otto doesn't come alone. He brings along his brother-in-law, Benno, a sharp-eyed and successful merchant. The moment Benno sees Myne, he immediately notices her sleek, glossy hair and the hair stick she wears, which is a simple yet beautiful creation that Myne made herself. Intrigued, he asks to take a closer look at the hair stick. Myne obliges, but when Benno inquires further about the shampoo she used, Myne shrewdly replies that the formula is confidential. Mama didn't raise a weak business girl. The meeting moves on to Lutz's dream of becoming a traveling trader. Otto listens attentively but quickly advises Lutz against it. He explains that the life of a traveling trader is dangerous and unreliable, especially for someone like Lutz, who comes from a city family. Instead, Otto suggests a more stable and sensible path, becoming a merchant apprentice. Benno, watching the exchange with interest, jumps in and asks both children what they hope to achieve if they choose the life of merchants. Lutz, though initially uncertain, eventually arrives at a new goal that feels more meaningful to him. He wants to help bring all of Myne's ideas to life. If he can help turn her dreams into reality, he believes they can both find success. Myne, on the other hand, explains her own ambitions. In her ideal world, she would love nothing more than to become a librarian, surrounded by books. However, understanding the challenges of such a dream in a book-scarce world, she has a backup plan: to make and sell paper using plant fibers, something she remembers from her previous life as Urano. She confidently states that she can produce a prototype of this plant-based paper by their next baptism, which will take place in about 1 year. Benno is intrigued by Myne's proposition and sees potential in her determination and innovative ideas. He makes them a deal: if they can succeed in creating a working prototype of this paper, he will take both Lutz and Myne on as apprentice merchants. Child labor is at its finest in this anime. For instance, Myne and Lutz are just 6-year-olds. The prospect of apprenticeship under a merchant as successful as Benno is thrilling for both children, and they leave the meeting full of excitement and hope for their future. Just as they are about to leave the meeting, Myne pauses, remembering a question she wanted to ask. She rushes back to Otto and Benno, inquiring if either of them knows of an illness that causes sudden fevers like the ones she has been experiencing. Both men exchange uncertain glances but ultimately tell her they aren't aware of any specific illness that matches her symptoms. Myne is disappointed by the lack of answers, but she doesn't press further. However, privately, Benno begins to suspect that Myne may be suffering from a rare and deadly condition known as the devouring, a disease that could have serious consequences if left unchecked. Undeterred by her health concerns, Myne begins the next phase of her plan, making paper using the washi method, a traditional Japanese paper-making technique she remembers from her life as Urano. To gather the materials and tools she needs, Myne strikes up a deal with Otto. In exchange for some of her shampoo, Otto agrees to give her nails, crucial for the construction of the equipment required for paper making. The two head to Otto's home, where Myne meets his wife, Corinna, a refined woman who lives in a wealthier part of the city. The upscale neighborhood impresses Myne, who is used to the more modest surroundings of her own family's home. While there, Corinna takes a keen interest in the shampoo that has left Otto's hair smooth and shiny. She asks Myne for help in washing her own hair with the magical new product. Myne eagerly obliges, and Corinna is thrilled with the results. The luxurious sheen and softness of her hair amazes her, and she expresses her deep satisfaction with Myne's work. During their time together, Corinna also takes the opportunity to ask Myne about Otto's life as a soldier. She wonders if Otto seems content in his new role or if he secretly misses his previous life as a merchant. Myne, sensing Corinna's concern, assures her that Otto appears to be very happy with his current work, easing her worries. Otto is equally pleased with the results of Myne's shampoo and hurriedly pays her with the nails she requested before sending her on her way so he can have some fun with his wife, adoring her new lustrous hair and whatnot. Later, while walking with Lutz, the boy opens up about his concerns regarding his family. As craftsmen, his parents and siblings have always had a strong distrust of merchants, seeing them as untrustworthy and opportunistic. Lutz isn't sure if his family will allow him to become an apprentice merchant, even though it's something he now truly desires. As the day ends, Myne and Lutz return from the woods, feeling a mixture of excitement and uncertainty about the future. When they reach the city gate, Otto is waiting for them with a special invitation. Benno has requested another meeting with the two children, further solidifying the opportunity that lies ahead. Lutz and Myne are invited to lunch at the Gilbert Company, where they meet with Benno in a more formal setting. Myne is surprised to find that the company is in the same building where she had met Corinna previously, making her feel a bit more at ease. The meeting, however, starts off on a rough note. Benno sternly reprimands both children for seeking help from Otto instead of coming directly to him for the materials needed for their paper prototype. As the owner of the Gilbert Company, Benno has big plans for the paper they're developing and intends to secure the sales rights to this potentially lucrative service. To him, it's clear that all dealings concerning the paper should go through him. Myne listens to the scolding, feeling guilty for the oversight, and quickly bows an apology, a gesture from her previous life as Urano that feels natural to her. Benno moves on to outline the terms of their partnership. He offers to fund all the materials they will need to develop the paper prototype. In return, he asks for the recipe for Myne's shampoo, which has already proven to be of great interest to the wealthy. Additionally, Benno promises that once the plant-based paper is successfully developed, Myne and Lutz will receive 10% of the profits as royalties, adding to whatever pay they earn from working as apprentices. However, Myne isn't satisfied with the terms as they stand. Displaying a sharp sense of business that surprises both Lutz and Benno, she negotiates for more security. Myne insists on retaining the production rights to the paper, ensuring that she and Lutz won't be pushed aside or fired once the paper's value becomes clear. Furthermore, she asks that Lutz be given exclusive sales rights for the paper, making sure he will have a guaranteed role in its distribution. Benno, though initially taken aback by Myne's boldness and foresight, ultimately agrees. To formalize the agreement, the deal is sealed using contract magic, a binding force that ensures neither party can break the deal without severe consequences.
貴族だけが持つ力だ。
本ばかりか魔力まで。お貴族様め。
Lutz watches the negotiation unfold, increasingly surprised by how naturally Myne seems to handle these complex discussions. I'm gonna be honest, all this business talk had me confused too for a bit there. As they leave the Gilberta company, his unease grows. Unable to shake the feeling that something is off, he confronts Myne, asking bluntly, "Are you the real Myne?" Caught off guard, Myne deflects the question, unsure of how to explain the truth without alienating her friend. Though Lutz apologizes for his outburst, his behavior remains strained, and Myne can't help but worry that he may grow more distant if he ever learns the full truth about her past as Urano. To prevent Lutz from growing more suspicious, Myne tries to handle some of her business with Benno privately. She plans to visit the lumber workers with Mark, Benno's assistant, to secure materials for the paper-making process. However, her fragile health catches up with her once again, and she faints before they can even reach their destination. When Myne wakes up, she finds herself back at the Gilberta company's store, still weak from the incident. Benno is furious with her for overexerting herself and strictly orders her to go straight home to rest and recover. He also forbids her from coming to the store alone in the future, insisting that she bring Lutz along to keep an eye on her. In a private conversation after the incident, Benno reveals a dark truth that has been slowly dawning on him. He is now convinced that Myne suffers from devouring, a deadly illness that afflicts commoner children born with mana. The disease, while lethal, can be treated with expensive magical items. But without such treatment, Myne's life is at grave risk. Benno, who has come to admire Myne's intelligence and potential, is deeply concerned about her future, knowing that the cost of treatment is far beyond what most commoners could ever afford. When Lutz and Myne meet again after this ordeal, Lutz confesses what has been troubling him. He admits that seeing Myne handle everything on her own, from the business negotiations to her attempts at crafting paper, has left him feeling useless. He thought that his role was to help, but Myne seems capable of managing so much without him. His frustration at feeling unnecessary leads him to question their partnership, though he reassures her that he doesn't hate her. However, something has shifted between them, and Lutz no longer refers to her as Myne. Despite the growing tension, they head back to the Gilberta company together. Benno assigns Lutz a new role. He is now responsible for looking after Myne as his #1 priority. With Myne's health continuing to be a concern, Benno makes it clear that Lutz must keep a close watch on her, especially during the strenuous tasks ahead. To support their work on the paper prototype, Benno also gives them a small studio near the south gate of the city, providing them with a space to experiment and create freely.
余計なことはしなくていいからおとなしくしてろよ。
聞いてるふりして言うこと聞く気ないだろ。
Lutz and Myne dive into their paper-making project with renewed determination, using their newly provided workshop as the base for their operations. They begin by visiting various craftsmen, lumber workers, and carpenters to gather the materials they need, focusing on the supplies necessary to build the equipment that will help them produce their plant-based paper. For the next month and a half, they work tirelessly to prepare, learning as they go and figuring out the best way to bring Myne's ideas to life. Once the materials are gathered, the two head into the forest to collect wood and begin the actual paper-making process. As Lutz busies himself collecting firewood, Myne gathers kindling nearby. During her task, she unknowingly picks up a fruit, which immediately begins to transform into a trom, a fast-growing fey plant that rapidly absorbs nutrients from the soil and becomes a dangerous threat if left unchecked. Alarmed by the sudden growth of the plant, Myne shouts for help. Lutz rushes over and calls for the other children, who help cut down the trom before it can grow any larger. After the trom is dealt with, Lutz explains to Myne that the Knight's Order usually has to be summoned to deal with large trom infestations, as the plants grow explosively and drain the earth of its life force.
そう
Inspired by the plant's rapid growth, Myne suggests they try using the cut trom to make paper, reasoning that since it is freshly sprouted, it should be soft enough to work with. To her delight, her idea proves to be a success, and the trom pulp works exceptionally well for paper making. Despite their success, Lutz's behavior reminds off. He dutifully helps with the paper making, but there's a distance in his actions, and his usual warmth seems diminished. Myne notices that Lutz has been growing increasingly suspicious of her, particularly her familiarity with skills like using chopsticks and her expert knowledge of paper making, both of which seem completely out of character for the Myne he's known all his life. The boy finally uses his upper head to think through things. Although he hasn't pressed her on the matter yet, it's clear that Lutz is grappling with a deep internal conflict. After they finish their first batch of paper, Lutz insists on finally having the conversation they've been putting off for so long. With quiet determination, he asks Myne directly, "Who are you really?" Unable to lie to him any longer, Myne admits the truth: she isn't the original Myne, but someone else who has taken over the body. Lutz's reaction is immediate and visceral. Shocked and hurt, he demands that she return the real Myne, the girl he grew up with and considered his friend. Myne, resigned to the situation, says she doesn't mind giving back her body, but she firmly believes the original Myne has already passed away. This revelation only angers Lutz further, and he lashes out at her in frustration. Feeling cornered, Myne responds angrily, telling him that she never wanted to steal the body of such a sickly, frail girl. She expresses her own dissatisfaction with the situation, making it clear that her life in this world has been just as challenging as his realization. "I sympathize with her. The gods really have been crueling to her, but on the other hand, she was the one who tortured her body through all that reading in her previous life." Lutz, still reeling from the truth, asks her how long she's been in Myne's body. When he learns that all of their shared memories, his friendship, their adventures, their paper-making journey were with this version of Myne, he begins to soften. Slowly, he comes to terms with the fact that although the body may not belong to the original Myne, the person he's grown close to is still the same one he's been working with all this time. In the end, Lutz forgives her, realizing that he doesn't want to lose the friend he's come to trust and care about. He accepts her for who she is, regardless of the past. With their bond mended, the two of them bring their completed paper prototypes to Benno for testing. Benno examines the results carefully, and after putting the paper through a series of tests, he is thoroughly impressed. The quality of the plant-based paper is even better than he anticipated, and he's eager to move forward with production. The success of their paper marks the beginning of a new chapter for both Lutz and Myne, as they move closer to their shared goal of making books a reality in a world where they seemed like an impossible dream. Benno, highly impressed by the quality of the paper prototype Myne and Lutz had brought him, wastes no time in rewarding them for their work. They are thrilled to receive payment for their efforts. This marks a significant milestone for Myne, who has been working tirelessly to bring her ideas to life in a world where paper is a rare and precious commodity. But as they celebrate their achievement, Myne also takes the opportunity to show Benno the flower hair ornament she had made for her sister Turi's baptism. The intricate design catches Benno's eye, and his business instincts kick in, and he starts thinking as to how he can exploit these 6-year-olds more. He recognizes the potential value in such a finely crafted item and suggests that Myne and Lutz accompany him to the Merchants Guild. There, he says, they can register for temporary guild cards, which would allow them to conduct business even before they are officially baptized. The idea of holding temporary guild cards excites the pair, especially Myne, who sees this as another step toward her long-term goal of living a life surrounded by books. However, when they arrive at the Merchants Guild and begin waiting for their appointment with the guild master, Myne's attention is immediately captured by something else entirely, a file cabinet filled with scrolls and documents. Her eyes light up at the sight, and she eagerly begins browsing through its contents. As someone who had lived her previous life as a book lover and scholar, seeing written materials in this new world is always a source of fascination. She finds a map of the city of Ehrenfest, an artifact of immense interest to her. Sensing her curiosity, Benno steps in and gives her a brief lesson on the map, explaining more about the layout of Ehrenfest and its surrounding areas. The conversation is interrupted when they are called in to meet with the guild master. Initially, the guild master is skeptical about granting temporary guild cards to 2 children who have not yet been baptized. He sees no reason to bend the rules for them. However, Benno, always quick on his feet, decides to present the flower hair ornament Myne had crafted. The guildmaster's reaction is instant and unexpected. He is captivated by the ornament, not only because of its beauty but because it turns out he has been searching for the creator of this very design. As it happens, the guildmaster has been trying to find someone to craft a special hair ornament for his granddaughter Freyda's baptism. Impressed by the craftsmanship and the coincidence, he agrees to issue temporary guild cards to both Myne and Lutz. This is a huge win for the children, not only because they can now engage in business more freely, but because they have already secured their first major commission for Freyda's baptism accessory. Myne, proud of her success, returns home brimming with excitement. Her family is ecstatic to hear the news and praises her for her hard work and determination. Myne's parents, Eva and Gunther, are especially proud of their daughter's achievements, given her fragile health and the challenges she has faced since waking up in this world. Turi is also overjoyed and feels special knowing her sister's flower hair ornament has attracted such high praise. This moment is one of pride and joy for the family. However, not everyone is as supportive. Lutz, while happy for their success, returns to his home to find that his family is still upset with his decision to become a merchant. His parents, who come from a long line of craftsmen, find it difficult to accept that Lutz has chosen a path so different from theirs. This familial conflict weighs heavily on Lutz, but he is determined to follow through with his dreams and support Myne in hers. A few days later, Lutz and Myne met with Freyda at the Othmer Company to finalize the details of the commissioned hair ornament. Freyda, an elegant and wealthy girl around Myne's age, shows them her baptism outfit so they can choose the right colors and materials for the accessory. After much discussion, they select a color scheme that complements Freyda's attire, and Myne picks out the thread she will use for the ornament. Freyda wears her hair in 2 ponytails, so Myne points out that she will need 2 hair ornaments instead of 1. Freyda, always the business-minded girl, offers to pay for both, but Myne insists on giving her the second ornament for free in exchange for the thread they need. Lutz, thinking practically, suggests a compromise. They will give Freyda the second hair ornament at half price. Freyda agrees to this arrangement, and though she tries to recruit Myne to work at the Othmer Company, Myne politely but firmly declines, standing by her own goals and ambitions. After about a month of diligent work, the hair ornaments are finally completed. Myne delivers them to Freyda, who is delighted with the finished product. During their conversation, Freyda notices that Myne appears frail and weak and directly asks if she has the devouring. This revelation takes Myne by surprise. Freyda, in a matter-of-fact manner, explains that she herself suffers from devouring, a rare and life-threatening illness that afflicts commoners born with excess mana. According to Freyda, illness cannot be cured but can be controlled using expensive magic tools that only the wealthy can afford. This leaves Myne in a state of deep reflection, realizing that her own condition may be more serious than she had initially thought. A year has passed since Myne awoke in her new world, and the warning Freyda gave her about the devouring is starting to prove true. Myne's fevers are growing more intense, striking more frequently, and lasting longer. Despite her best efforts to keep her emotions in check and shove it in a box, the illness is relentless. As winter approaches, the weight of her situation becomes heavier, threatening to overwhelm her resolve. Myne strives to remain focused on her goals, even as the shadows of her illness loom ever larger. In this period of escalating illness, Myne finds herself grappling with the challenges of managing her business aspirations alongside her deteriorating health. Benno, ever the astute merchant, recognizes the potential in Myne and Lutz and assigns them the crucial task of improving their etiquette, appearance, and reading and writing skills. He understands that these skills will be critical for their future as merchants in a world that values refinement and presentation. Under his guidance, Myne and Lutz find themselves navigating the complexities of merchant life, balancing their work with the pressing reality of Myne's illness. As the duo works diligently to refine their skills, Benno also seeks Myne's insights into refining the production method for their popular shampoo. Their business dealings become more formalized as they negotiate, showcasing Myne's keen intellect and business acumen. Initially, Benno offers her 2 small golds for her input, but Myne, fueled by her determination to secure financial stability for her family, skillfully pushes for 3 small golds. Benno, impressed by her negotiation skills, agrees to the deal, emphasizing the importance of saving any money she can to help treat her devouring. However, as they continue their discussions, Benno's suspicions about Myne grow. He senses that she is more than she appears, yet he chooses not to press her for details when she avoids the subject, allowing her some measure of privacy amidst the turmoil of her life. In the midst of this bustling work life, Myne takes a bold step to meet the increasing demand for their hair ornaments. She surprises her family with the announcement that production needs to ramp up significantly. Turi and Eva are initially taken aback by the sudden influx of orders but are quickly motivated when Myne promises them a bonus of 2 medium bronzes for each ornament they complete. This promise ignites a fire within them, and they set to work with renewed vigor. Later, Myne advises Lutz to take a similar approach with his brothers, offering incentives to encourage their help. During one of her routine visits to the city gate with Gunther, an urgent report comes in about a Trom plant causing trouble in the area. Recognizing a potential opportunity, Myne and Lutz swiftly head to the site to collect Trom wood. This resource becomes invaluable as they successfully use it to produce more paper, a significant step in their ongoing business ventures. However, just as they finish their work, Myne suddenly collapses under the weight of another fever, which catches her off guard. She hadn't been feeling particularly anxious or stressed at the time, making the sudden onset of illness more bewildering. Exhausted and overwhelmed by her circumstances, she confesses to Lutz that the illness is worsening, flaring up more frequently than ever before. Moved by her vulnerability, Lutz offers her a piggyback ride home, tears welling in his eyes as he expresses his deep concern for her well-being. Later, during a meeting with Benno to brainstorm new product ideas, Lutz makes a solemn vow to help Myne realize all her inventions. His determination stems from a genuine desire to help her save money in any way possible, hoping that it will somehow lead to a way for her to survive the devouring. Their discussion brims with optimism as they make ambitious plans for the spring, dreaming of what they can achieve together despite the challenges ahead. However, this fragile sense of hope is shattered when Myne suddenly collapses from a severe fever. Alarmed by the sudden turn of events, Benno quickly calls for a carriage to rush her to the guildmaster's house, panic rising in his chest as he fears for her life. The gravity of the situation becomes painfully clear as Myne's condition spirals out of control. Myne awakens in Freda's luxurious bed, disoriented, with a shattered magic tool bracelet lying nearby. The bracelet, designed to mitigate the effects of the devouring by absorbing her overflowing mana, had finally broken after reaching its limit. Freda explains that the tool can no longer be used, and without it, Myne has less than a year before her fever overtakes her body and she succumbs to the illness. The news is devastating, as Myne had hoped that this solution would offer her more time. Freda, calm yet direct, explains the harsh realities of the situation. The only way for Myne to survive long-term is by forging a contract with a noble. In exchange for becoming a noble's mistress, she would gain access to the magical tools required to suppress the devouring. Freda herself has already signed such a contract, and once she comes of age, she will move to the noble's quarter. I would have accepted the offer and spent my life lavishly, leaving the peasant family behind. While this arrangement offers safety and the promise of a long life, it comes at the cost of leaving one's family behind and the commoner life Myne holds dear. Freda warns Myne that without such a contract, her fate is sealed, and she will die soon if she chooses to stay with her family. Despite the grim situation, Myne makes a swift decision. Rather than becoming indebted to Freda's family for the magic tool used to suppress her illness, she insists on paying the full price. The guildmaster, who had hoped to use the debt as leverage to force her into becoming an apprentice at the Othmar company, is visibly displeased but reluctantly accepts the payment. He had counted on binding Myne through this debt, but she cleverly outmaneuvers him, leaving his plans foiled. In the aftermath, Myne and Lutz brainstorm new ideas to continue building their business. They come up with a plan to create and sell games that commoner families can enjoy during the long, cold winter months when they are stuck inside. The idea excites them both and offers a much-needed distraction from the seriousness of Myne's condition. Lutz, though shaken by the growing intensity of Myne's illness, remains steadfast in his support, promising to stay by her side no matter what. At home, Myne's family is oblivious to the severity of her condition. They assume that the worst is behind her, thrilled by her apparent recovery after the use of the magic tool. As winter draws near, Myne helps to complete her baptism outfit, a project she had eagerly worked on despite her poor health. However, the joyful atmosphere in the household is soon interrupted by the weight of the truth. Unable to keep the secret any longer, Myne gathers her family and sits them down for a heart-wrenching conversation. With tears in her eyes, she explains the true nature of her illness, revealing that her condition has not improved and that she is still very much in danger. She admits that the only way she could survive would be to leave them and go to the noble's quarter, where she would live as a noble's mistress. However, with great determination, she declares that she would rather spend her remining time with her family than live a long life separated from them. Myne would rather face death surrounded by the people she loves than leave a life of isolation, even if that life were to last longer. Her family is devastated by the revelation, struggling to comprehend the cruel fate that awaits their beloved daughter and sister. Gunther, her father, is particularly heartbroken, as he had always been overprotective of Myne and done everything in his power to keep her safe. Eva, her mother, is torn between wanting to protect Myne and knowing there is nothing she can do to stop the inevitable. Turi, who has always admired her little sister's determination, is left in tears, unable to bear the thought of losing her. Despite their overwhelming grief, Myne's family respects her wishes. They vow to support her as best they can in the time she has left, promising to cherish every moment with her. Myne, though weak and facing an uncertain future, finds comfort in the decision she has made. She may not have long to live, but she will live her remining days on her own terms, surrounded by the love of her family and friends. As winter sets in, Myne and Lutz continue to work on their business ventures, all the while grappling with the knowledge that their time together may be short. Myne is determined to leave behind a legacy, hoping to make as much progress on her book-related dreams as possible before her illness overtakes her. With Lutz by her side and her family's unwavering support, she faces the future with courage, knowing that she has chosen the path that matters most to her, a life filled with love, even if it is a brief one. These animes really do deviate heavily from the realities of life, I must say. Myne, fully aware that her time is limited, begins to formulate plans for the future under the somber realization that she may not survive to see the next winter. As she reflects on her circumstances, she decides against taking an apprenticeship with the Gilberta Company. The demanding work of an apprentice merchant would be too much for her frail body to handle, especially as her health continues to decline. Instead, she sells the paper-making rights to Benno, allowing him to produce it commercially, while ensuring that Lutz retains the sales rights. This way, Lutz can continue to earn a living from their hard work even after she is gone. In the meantime, Freda encounters Myne again and is taken aback by her decision to stay with her family at the cost of her own life. Although Freda understands the pressure Myne feels, she expresses concern over Myne's willingness to sacrifice herself for her family's sake. Nevertheless, she purchases several of Myne's dessert recipes and compensates her fairly, recognizing Myne's talent and determination to leave behind as much financial support for her family as possible. Myne's resolve to save every coin reflects her fierce love for her family, as she wishes to provide them with some security in her absence. As summer approaches, Myne and Lutz eagerly anticipate their baptism, both turning 7 years old. On the day of the ceremony, Myne wears a modified version of Tiri's dress, one that fits her beautifully and allows her to move comfortably. She also makes a stunning new flower hair ornament, a creation of her own design. The preparation for the ceremony fills her with excitement, and she feels a rush of joy as she receives high praise from the neighbors for her appearance. Benno, aware of the significance of the day, attends the baptism to support both Myne and Lutz, proud of their achievements thus far. When they arrive at the church, Myne's anticipation peaks as she sees the high priest reading from a large, ornate book of scriptures. A wave of laughter bubbles up inside her as she observes the priest's religious prayer pose, which strikingly resembles the Glico pose she remembers from her previous life in Japan. The laughter bursts forth uncontrollably, causing the priest to misinterpret her trembling as a sign of illness. They quickly escorted her to a waiting room to recover, concerned about her well-being. In the waiting room, Myne's curiosity gets better of her. She scans the interior of the temple, her eyes darting around as she tries to find her way back to the Myne Hall. During her exploration, she stumbles upon a small book room filled with scrolls and documents, and her heart races at the thought of all the knowledge contained within. Eager to delve into the contents, she rushes towards the door, only to abruptly halt when she realizes too late that the room is restricted to members of the clergy. A magical barrier prevents her from entering, and she is left feeling both frustrated and determined. Refusing to be deterred, Myne eagerly asks a Grey Priestess if she can become an apprentice priestess, believing that this will grant her access to the temple's extensive library of books. The Grey Priestess seems amused and intrigued by Myne's enthusiasm and takes her to meet the temple's senior authority, the High Priest. However, when they meet, the High Priest mistakenly assumes Myne is the daughter of a wealthy family due to her boldness and passion for knowledge. He explains that if she wishes to join the temple, she must provide a substantial donation. Myne finds herself in a predicament. The desire to learn and read the sacred texts burns brightly within her, yet she knows her family cannot afford such a donation. She contemplates her options, realizing that even if her time is limited, she is determined to make the most of her remining days. With newfound determination, Myne resolves to explore every avenue to secure her family's future and fulfill her dreams, even if it means navigating the intricate world of noble expectations and the daunting requirements of the clergy. The thought of acquiring knowledge becomes more than just a personal ambition. It evolves into a mission that intertwines her love for her family with her aspirations for a life that transcends the physical limits imposed upon her. As the ceremony unfolds, Myne reflects on the choices she has made, the friendships she has formed, and the life she has crafted despite the shadow of the devouring looming over her. She feels a sense of peace in her decisions, knowing she has given her all for the one she loves. As the High Priest continues with the ceremony, Myne closes her eyes for a moment, silently praying for strength to face whatever challenges lie ahead, determined to carve her own path in this world. Myne recovers in the cathedral's waiting room after her collapse, and Lutz comes to check on her. He's visibly worried and exasperated because of her fainting. When he discovers that her collapse was due to getting overly excited about books, he can't help but feel frustrated. After all, they had gone to the cathedral for her baptism ceremony, which was supposed to be a significant and solemn occasion. Yet, for Myne, books were the most important thing, and she had been overwhelmed by the thought of being in a place that held so much knowledge. Lutz, concerned for her well-being, hurries Myne out of the cathedral before she can do anything else reckless. Despite his concern, Myne is still filled with excitement about the prospect of being able to access books. That night at dinner, she bravely asks her family for permission to become an apprentice priestess. Her request shocks them, especially her father, Gunther. He immediately and strictly refuses, explaining that commoners only join the church under dire circumstances, usually when they are orphans or unwanted children. The life of a gray priestess, he tells her, is incredibly harsh and demanding. Additionally, if she were to join the church, there was a real possibility that she would be separated from her family. Myne is heartbroken by her father's refusal. She had finally found a place where she could read books, something that had always been her deepest desire, and now that opportunity was slipping away. But after a long and emotional discussion, Myne reluctantly agrees to follow her father's wishes and decline the church's offer. However, the tension and heated nature of the conversation take their toll on her body, and once again, Myne develops a fever. Several days later, after Myne recovered from her fever, Lutz escorts her back to the cathedral. She's determined to resolve the situation with the church in some way, still clinging to the hope of gaining access to their books. When they arrive, they meet the head priest, the second highest authority in the cathedral, who works directly under the high priest. The head priest has been tasked with reading the scriptures to Myne, but her passion for books shines through once again. She eagerly asks if she can read the book herself instead of having it read to her. Although hesitant at first, the head priest agrees, but with a strict condition: Myne must not touch the pages directly. Despite the restriction, Myne is overjoyed by the opportunity. She's finally able to interact with books in this world, even if only in a limited way. Her joy is so intense that she throws herself into learning several new words from the scriptures, impressing the head priest with her quick understanding. It's a significant moment for Myne, as it marks her first real connection with books since her reincarnation in this world. However, her happiness is tempered by the reality of her frail health and the looming threat of the devouring. As the conversation continues, Myne explains her condition to the head priest. She tells him about devouring and how it limits her strength and stamina, making her much weaker than the average person. Upon hearing this, the head priest decides to act. He retrieves the cathedral's sacred grail, a magical tool used to measure mana capacity, to check the extent of Myne's condition. The results are surprising, and both the head priest and the other priests in the cathedral take note of Myne's powerful mana. Satisfied with what they've learned, the head priest informs Myne that she must bring her parents back for a more formal discussion. After the visit to the cathedral, Myne and Lutz meet with Benno, the savvy merchant who has been helping Myne and Lutz navigate the business world. Benno, ever cautious and protective of Myne, scolds her for her thoughtlessness in getting involved with the church so hastily. He warns her that the church is likely interested in her for her mana, which is in short supply among the nobles and clergy. Benno fears that the church sees her as a valuable resource and will likely try to force her into becoming a priestess, whether she wants to or not. He urges her to take precautions and negotiate for better treatment if she decides to join the church. This includes making sure she will still have access to her friends and family and not be completely isolated within the temple. Myne is surprised by the depth of Benno's concern for her well-being. Up until now, she had seen him mostly as a business partner, but this conversation reveals how much he genuinely cares about her. His assistant, Mark, even tells Myne that Benno sees her as a daughter, which touches her deeply. Taking Benno's advice seriously, Myne agrees to sign a magic contract with Lutz, one that will grant him exclusive sales rights to the products they create together. More importantly, the contract allows Myne to contact Lutz in case of an emergency. She's initially hesitant, worrying that it might put Lutz in danger, but Lutz, ever loyal and brave, tells her that he's ready to take the risk. He's determined to help her in any way he can, even if it means facing danger. After dealing with the contract, Myne and Lutz head to the Merchants Guild to register her workshop as the Myne Studio, an important step in solidifying their business. While they're there, they have a conversation with Freda, the young girl who had previously warned Myne about the dangers of the devouring. Freda and Myne discuss the idea of refining a pound cake recipe that Myne had introduced, and Myne suggests that Freda host a tasting event to gather feedback on the recipe. As Myne and Lutz walk home together after their busy day, the topic of their earlier promise comes up. Lutz, still saddened by the direction Myne's life is taking, tells her that he's hurt she can't uphold their original promise to make and sell books together. Creating books had always been their shared dream, but Myne's decision to join the church seems to be pulling them in different directions. Despite this, Myne reassures him with a smile, promising that they will still find a way to work together even after she becomes an apprentice priestess. Lutz, reassured by her words, agrees and smiles back at her, showing once again the depth of their friendship and trust in each other. Myne gathers her family in the living room, home, her heart racing as she prepares to share the news about her invitation to the temple. She explains that the letter she received calls her to the cathedral in 2 days and that if she enters the temple under the right conditions, she might be able to treat her devouring by giving mana to the church. Gunther listens carefully, acknowledging that the plan could ensure her survival, though there is an undercurrent of concern in his voice. Turi, on the other hand, is visibly worried about the dangers of negotiating with nobles, fearing that Myne could be taken away. Myne reassures her sister, trying to ease her fears, while Eva remains quiet, her face a mixture of pride and apprehension. The family debates the risks and benefits late into the night, weighing the possible outcomes. The following day, Myne, Gunther, and Eva arrive at the temple, with a towering structure that seems to intensify the tension. Inside, they are led to the High Priest's chamber, where the atmosphere immediately shifts. The High Priest, upon seeing them, exudes arrogance, disdainfully addressing them as commoners and dismissing any notion that they could negotiate with him.
両親です。
ああ、まさか貧民とは。What more do you want from me?
His overbearing attitude is suffocating, and when he demands that Myne be taken by force, Gunther steps in, refusing to be intimidated. The situation escalates as the High Priest threatens the family's execution if they don't comply. The pressure becomes too much for Myne, and in a moment of desperation, she loses control of her mana. Magic surges through the room as she instinctively lashes out, choking the High Priest with her magic. Shock ripples through the chamber as her family watches in horror while the High Priest struggles to breathe. In a cold stance, she tells him, "You wish to talk? Then let's talk with mana." Just as things seem to spiral completely out of control, the head priest intervenes, calming the situation by grounding Myne and calling for peace. The High Priest collapses, unconscious, leaving a stunned silence behind him. With the immediate danger over, the head priest sits down with Myne and her family, apologizing for how they were treated. His tone is respectful, and he offers Myne a proper negotiation, asking her to join the temple on her own terms. He acknowledges her mana's value and outlines a more equitable arrangement. Myne, feeling a sense of relief, agrees to his proposal, understanding that she can attain some control over her fate. After the meeting, as they leave the temple, the atmosphere is much lighter. Myne feels a weight lifted off her shoulders, knowing her family's concerns have been addressed. When they arrive home, Turi and Lutz are waiting outside, their faces etched with worry. Lutz softens as he reassures Myne that her safety is all that matters. As the sun sets and casts a warm glow over their neighborhood, Myne runs to Turi, embracing her sister tightly, grateful to be home and surrounded by the people she loves. Myne is super excited to join the cathedral as a blue-robed apprentice priestess. But of course, nothing in her life happens quickly or easily, so she has to wait a week while everything gets sorted. Still, she's excited because she got to enter on her own terms, and her parents are ecstatic for their little miracle. Myne is practically jumping with excitement when her sister interrupts her, asking her to calm down. Only then does Myne decide that she needs to get her head back in the game. She then drops by the Gilberta company, where Luz has just started working as an apprentice. Under Mark's strict but helpful guidance, he's learning how to greet customers properly and act all polished and professional with a dash so that Starbucks' fake barista smiles. When Luz leaves to etch the things Myne wants, the shopkeeper thanks her for letting Luz practice his skills. But Myne is happy to help because she was told by Luz how brutal his training is at the church, and she's always happy to help a friend. Myne then tells Benno all about her negotiations with the church, and for once things actually went in her favor. She was to be treated as nobility and would get a blue robe instead of a gray one. She'll still get to live at home, rest when she's sick, which she sadly is a lot, and get Lutz as a retainer like other blue robes. Her official job will be taking care of the cathedral's books and magical tools, and she's quite happy with this. Benno listens and admits the head priest sounds surprisingly decent, like not shady for once. On her way back, Myne runs into Luz's mother, Carla, and happily tells her how hard Luz has been working at his new apprenticeship. She sounds genuinely proud of him and makes sure Carla knows he is doing well. But when it comes to her own plans to join the church, she says absolutely nothing. She keeps it completely secret and sticks to her usual cover story, saying she will continue helping Otto with his work and assisting her mother at home. Carla then casually mentions that some unknown man has been asking questions about Myne around town. The way she says it is calm, but the information itself is clearly not normal, and immediately stands out as sus. Meanwhile, Gunther and Otto go out for drinks to celebrate the news that Otto's wife, Corinna, is pregnant. The mood starts light as they talk about family and future plans, including Otto possibly retiring from his career as a soldier. Otto explains that the Gilberta company has become extremely busy because Myne's inventions are selling so well, and they now need him to help manage things full-time. He even jokes and calls Myne Benno's flutter name, comparing her to some unstoppable source of profit and new ideas. Gunther, however, is not in the mood to joke. He is deeply worried about what might happen to Myne at the cathedral. As things start getting serious, Otto points out that Gunther actually has the perfect role to protect Myne. As a gatekeeper, he knows exactly who is coming in and out of the city, which gives him a huge advantage in keeping an eye on any potential threats. Hearing this, Gunther suddenly gets fired up. He straightens up, practically ready to jump into action, and declares that he will definitely protect his family no matter what happens. Otto supports him, and the two of them feel like they have everything under control. For a second, they really believe they have just solved the entire problem like two heroes in a story. But of course, reality has other plans. What they think is a private and serious conversation is not private at all. Someone nearby ends up overhearing everything they just said, so their big secret strategy meeting turns out to be about as secret as yelling your plans in the middle of a busy street. Later, when Myne tells Benno about the suspicious man asking about her, he quickly connects it to a recent break-in at the Merchants Guild. This makes the situation feel much more serious, and it becomes clear that something larger may be going on behind the scenes. Even so, life does not slow down. Myne, Tuli, and Effa visit Corinna to show her a redesigned baptism outfit and ask for her opinion on a new hair ornament. During the visit, Myne casually turns the moment into a business opportunity and sells Benno the rights to produce the ornaments. For her, mixing daily life with business has become completely natural. At another point, Myne helps out at Frida's pound cake tasting event, working as a waitress.
コリンナさんに頼まれたりの権利をベンノさんに売ったりしてます。の試食会にようこそ。何をしているんだ。お手伝いがないにも程がある。When Benno arrives and sees her, he immediately scolds her for being careless, especially when he is trying to keep attention away from her identity. He is also clearly annoyed that she sold the pound cake recipe to Frida instead of him. Myne responds without hesitation, pointing out that he has been underpaying her for her ideas and that he would not even be able to use the recipe properly without sugar, skilled chefs, or the right equipment. Benno, now fully fired up and competitive, decides that he will simply train his own chefs and figure it out anyway. Giving up is clearly not an option for him. The next day, the head priest reports everything about Myne to the high priest and suggests allowing her to continue her business activities. It sounds like a reasonable plan, but the high priest rejects it, seemingly out of pure stubbornness, and instead assigns one of his own retainers to Myne along with the biggest troublemaker from the orphanage. When Myne and Lutz finally arrive at the cathedral, they are greeted by Fran, who formally addresses her as Lady Myne. Lutz cannot help himself and bursts out laughing because the title sounds so unexpected coming from her current situation. They soon part ways, and Myne awkwardly apologizes, but Fran remains cold and professional, showing no warmth at all. As he leads her inside, she struggles to keep up with his fast-walking pace. On the way, a blue-robed priest openly looks down on her and calls her a commoner, and even the gray-robed staff seem unhappy about her presence. The atmosphere is unwelcoming and tense, making it clear that she does not belong there in their eyes. The head priest guides Myne through the oath ceremony and gives her official robes, marking the beginning of her new role. He then introduces her to her retainers, Fran, Delia, and Gil, and reminds her to behave with authority and proper dignity. However, the moment he leaves, everything immediately falls apart. Gil starts arguing with her. Delia openly admits that she only took the job to get closer to the high priest for her own personal reasons, and Fran bluntly tells Myne that it is her responsibility to manage them. Myne tries to assert authority by threatening to replace them, but her words have no effect at all, and no one takes her seriously. Standing there surrounded by confusion, disrespect, and constant tension, Myne realizes that she has no idea how she is supposed to survive in this completely new and difficult environment. On Myne's first day at the cathedral, the head priest explains all the duties she is expected to handle, including helping him with paperwork as his assistant. He also teaches her how to use the church's divine tool, the Shield of Shutas Arya, to release her mana. When she finally lets some of her mana out, she immediately feels lighter and more comfortable, almost like a huge weight has been lifted off her body. For someone who has been constantly struggling with too much mana, this feels like a rare moment of relief. As soon as the meeting ends, Myne wastes no time and rushes straight toward the cathedral library, completely focused on what really matters to her books. Meanwhile, her new retainers, Delia, Gil, and Fran, start clashing with each other, but Myne decides to ignore all of that chaos and peacefully settles down to read. She becomes so absorbed in her book that the rest of the world practically disappears. Later, Gil tries to pull her away so she can go eat lunch, but she casually tells him to go without her. When he keeps insisting and refuses to leave her alone, Myne loses her patience and releases her mana at him in frustration, which creates a tense and overwhelming atmosphere. Fran quickly steps in and clears the room to prevent things from getting worse.
After spending the entire day reading like she has no other responsibilities in life, Myne finally meets Luz at the gate and then heads to the Gilberta company to talk to Benno about bringing her donation to the temple. Her retainers assume they will accompany her, but they are completely surprised when she firmly tells them to stay behind. Gil storms off, saying he is going to find food, while Myne calmly tells Delia to inform the head priest about their upcoming donation. This forces Fran to stay back as well, just to make sure the message is actually delivered properly. When Myne reaches Benno, he is absolutely furious. He scolds her for walking around in her blue priestess robes outside the temple, explaining that she could easily be mistaken for a noble and get kidnapped. While she is there, she watches Luz working hard and taking his apprenticeship seriously, which makes her realize that she needs to start putting more effort into her own role as a priestess. She then casually mentions that she told the head priest they would bring the donation as soon as it was ready, without realizing that this would be understood as immediately. Benno and Mark panic, rush to prepare everything, and quickly head to the cathedral dressed in formal clothing. Back at the cathedral, Myne starts speaking to Fran in a more formal and respectful way, and she notices that his attitude softens slightly toward her. As they walk to meet the head priest, Benno points out that Fran is walking too fast for Myne to keep up. Fran is surprised at first, but then slows down, showing a small but meaningful change in his behavior. When they present the donation, the head priest asks Benno about Myne's personality. Benno carefully explains that she is generous, or at least indifferent, as long as no one threatens the people she cares about or her books. He also warns that she is extremely sickly, which leads the head priest to instruct Fran to learn how to properly manage her health. The head priest then asks about the rumor that Myne is Benno's flatrain, which is a word people use to suggest a romantic relationship. Benno is so shocked that he almost chokes on his tea and quickly denies it, insisting that she is only his apprentice. Mark steps in to clarify that, in this case, flatrain simply refers to someone who brings in new ideas and profit. After they agree that the church will receive 10% of the profits from Myne's business, things suddenly take a turn when Myne collapses. Ferdinand criticizes her for losing control, but Benno quickly explains that she often falls ill and asks to leave. As he carries her out of the temple, Fran runs after them and apologizes sincerely, saying that he feels he has not served her well and was hurt when the head priest reassigned him. Myne reassures him that his former master still values him and promises that she will do her best moving forward. Meanwhile, Delia reports everything to the high priest and is rewarded with food for her loyalty. At the same time, Gil goes to the orphanage hoping to get something to eat, but he is turned away and told that it is now his master's responsibility to feed him. When Luz drops Myne off at the cathedral gate, they are greeted by her 3 retainers. Fran welcomes her politely and warmly, but the atmosphere is far from peaceful. Gil is still clearly upset with her and hasn't let go of his resentment, while Delia wastes no time and runs off to report to the high priest the moment she gets the chance. Gil, feeling completely ignored and frustrated, suddenly grabs Myne by the shoulder, causing her to lose balance and fall to the ground.
まだそいつのことを聞いてないぞこのバカマインが怪我したらどうするんだ何すんだよ話せ
The situation escalates instantly. Luz jumps in without hesitation, tackles Gil, and starts yelling at him in anger. Fran quickly intervenes and reminds them that violence is strictly forbidden inside the cathedral. Myne, trying to calm things down, asks Luz to stop, and he reluctantly listens. Once things settle, Gil finally explains why he is so angry. He accuses Myne of failing as a master because she has not provided for his basic needs like food and shelter. While Fran and Delia are being supported by the head priest and high priest, Gil has been left with nothing. Hearing this, Myne is shocked and realizes she completely overlooked a responsibility that should have been obvious. She immediately apologizes and promises that she will take responsibility for him from now on. Later, Myne goes to the head priest's office to help him with paperwork, but things take an awkward turn when she casually changes into her blue robes right there in his office, completely shocking him. She explains that she would happily change somewhere else if only she actually had a proper place to do so. The Grey Priest Arno suggests that she use the orphanage director's office, which is currently empty, and the head priest agrees to this solution. Trying to fix her earlier mistake, Myne gives Gil a chance to prove himself. She tells him to go ahead and clean the room, promising that he will be rewarded with food if he does a good job. Fran and the others are unsure if trusting him with such a task is a good idea, but Myne insists that it is an important opportunity for him. The idea of working in exchange for something is completely new to Gil, but he agrees and takes the task seriously. By the time Myne arrives, the room is perfectly clean. She praises him and even pats his head, which deeply moves him, bringing him to tears. Meanwhile, the high priest becomes furious when he learns that Myne has been given the orphanage director's office. He is especially angry at Delia for not informing him about it. In his frustration, he throws her out of his chambers, showing just how harsh and unforgiving he can be. Later, Myne gives Fran and Gil proper town clothes so they can accompany her outside the cathedral. When they go downtown together, they stop at a street vendor to eat lunch. Myne and Lutz find it amusing to watch Fran and Gil follow their strict habits, like saying grace and waiting for higher status people to start eating first. Gil is surprised by how relaxed and different life is outside the cathedral, and he begins to understand Myne better. Feeling embarrassed about his earlier behavior, he apologizes to her for mocking her before. When they meet Benno, he is thrilled to learn that Myne now has access to an oven thanks to her new room. This opens up new business possibilities, and he immediately sends his cooks, Hugo and Ella, to the cathedral to start practicing recipes. He even joins Myne for lunch to taste their cooking, and the results are excellent. Just as things seem to be going well, Delia suddenly rushes in. Upset and angry, she accuses Myne of getting her into trouble with the high priest. Gil responds coldly, telling her that those who do not work should not eat. Delia, who is used to gaining favor by entertaining important men, tries to flirt with Benno, but he immediately pushes her away, uninterested. Realizing she has no support left, and terrified of being sent back to the orphanage, Delia desperately begs Myne to give her some kind of work so she can stay. Seeing her situation, Myne agrees, but makes it clear that she will only provide for her if she actually does her job properly. One day, Myne decides that she wants to see the orphanage area of the cathedral with her own eyes, so she asks Gil to guide her there. However, what she finds is far worse than anything she expected. Instead of a normal living space, they arrive at what is basically a locked underground bunker, where the children are weak, thin, and clearly malnourished. The place feels dark, neglected, and forgotten. Gil explains that the cathedral removed the previous priestess who used to take care of the orphanage, and since then the children have been left without proper guidance or support. They have been surviving aimlessly, with no structure, no care, and barely enough food to stay alive. The only reason they have not completely starved is because Gil sometimes sneaks them leftover food. Myne is deeply shaken by what she sees and immediately wants to help them, but she quickly realizes that she does not have the money, the authority, or even the church's permission to do anything about it yet. Later that same day, Myne meets with Luz and Fran to talk about what she saw, and to figure out if there is any possible way to help the orphanage. The situation feels overwhelming at first, but Luz, being practical as always, comes up with a clever idea. He suggests turning the orphanage into a working branch of their paper-making business. This way the children could learn skills, stay busy, and earn resources to support themselves instead of just waiting around with nothing to do. It is a simple but powerful idea that could solve multiple problems at once, giving the children purpose, structure, and a way to survive. With Benno's guidance, Myne prepares to take the next big step. She arranges a meeting with the head priest, hoping to gain official approval to take over the orphanage and set up her workshop there. When she meets him, however, the conversation does not start smoothly. He first criticizes her for not behaving with proper noble manners and warns her to be careful around her retainers and other blue-robed priests, especially those who are loyal to the High Bishop. Despite the stern lecture, he listens to her request seriously. After some discussion, he agrees to let her become the director of the orphanage and supports her plan to improve the situation. During this conversation, he also reveals something personal, that like Myne, he did not grow up in the church and only joined later in life for his own reasons. This creates a subtle understanding between them. With this approval, everything begins to change. Supported by her retainers, Myne heads back to the orphanage, this time not as a visitor, but as its new director. She is no longer just someone who feels sorry for the children. She is now responsible for them and has the authority to take action. Even though the task ahead is huge and full of challenges, she steps into her new role with determination, ready to fix what has been neglected for so long. Under the leadership of Myne and with the steady support of Fran and Gil, the orphanage does not just improve slightly but begins to change in a slow, steady, and very noticeable way over time. What was once a place where children sat around with no purpose, no direction, and no hope, gradually turns into a space that feels organized, structured, and alive with activity. A clear and simple rule is introduced, one that everyone can understand. Those who work will be rewarded for their effort. This rule alone begins to shift the entire atmosphere. The children are taken out to the forest by Gunther and Lutz, where they gather materials needed for papermaking. For the first time in their lives, their effort actually leads to something meaningful and productive, something they can see and feel. Myne makes sure to reward them for their hard work, and this encouragement motivates them even more, pushing them to keep trying and improving. At the same time, she introduces simple but effective learning tools. Her 3 retainers are given slates and pencils, so they can practice writing regularly, while the younger children receive handmade flashcards created from the wood they collected in the forest. These flashcards are not only useful for learning, but also fun to use, turning education into something enjoyable rather than something forced. As expected, Benno quickly notices their value and immediately buys the rights to produce them. turning even this small and simple idea into yet another business opportunity. Slowly but surely, the orphanage, which once felt empty, neglected and hopeless, begins to feel active, productive, and filled with a growing sense of purpose and possibility. During a walk with Lutz, Myne learns more about his personal life, especially about how he has grown distant from his brother Sage, which adds a deeper and more emotional layer to his character and situation. At the same time, news spreads that the Star Festival is approaching, and Myne becomes curious about whether the orphans will be allowed to take part in it. When she asks the high priest, he explains that while the temple is usually open to the townspeople during the festival, the orphans are normally expected to stay quiet, hidden, and out of sight. However, after hearing her request and considering it, he allows them to participate in a limited and controlled way. They are given permission to take part in the festival tradition of throwing fruit at each other within the temple grounds, as long as they behave properly and do not cause any trouble. Even though the permission is restricted, it still means a great deal. For the orphans, it is a rare opportunity to experience joy, celebration, and a sense of normal childhood that they have long been denied. When the day of the festival finally arrives, everything seems to be going smoothly at first, and the atmosphere is filled with excitement and anticipation. However, the situation quickly takes an unexpected and dangerous turn, when the fruit that has been collected suddenly transforms into a pod of trom sprouts. The moment Myne touches it, the shift is immediate, and the harmless festival activity turns into a serious threat, as the trombe is a dangerous and predatory plant. Luz and the orphans react quickly, working together to defeat it before it can cause serious damage or harm. Once the danger is dealt with, they return to the celebration and begin throwing fruit at each other, as originally planned, doing their best to enjoy the festival despite the chaos that had just occurred. By the end of the day, however, Myne once again becomes physically unwell due to overexertion, and she has to be carried home by Fran. When she later returns to the temple, the high priest informs her that the celebration caused damage to the temple grounds, and that he is already aware of the trombe incident. Because of this, he punishes her by placing her in detention for breaking her promise not to cause trouble, even though Fran attempts to defend her and explain that the situation was not entirely within her control. While serving her punishment in the repentance chamber, Myne's condition continues to worsen, and she eventually collapses once again due to her fragile health. Seeing this happen, the high priest begins to reconsider his earlier judgment. He realizes that Fran's protest had not been an act of defiance or disobedience, but rather a genuine expression of concern for Myne's well-being. This realization leads him to feel a sense of regret over how harshly he treated her, especially knowing how physically weak she is. In this moment, there is a clear shift in understanding. It highlights not only Myne's ongoing struggle with her condition, but also the growing awareness among those around her, as they slowly begin to recognize both her physical limitations and the strength of her determination to keep going despite them. After being denied permission to travel with Benno to another town for work, Luz becomes frustrated and decides to run away from home. He cuts off contact with his family completely and starts living in the attic of Benno's shop, choosing his work over everything else. His brother Ralph comes to bring him back, but instead of resolving things peacefully, the situation turns into an argument and creates a public scene. Later, his mother also comes to convince him to return home, but that attempt fails as well and only adds more tension. As this keeps happening, the other apprentices at the Gilberta company begin to feel irritated and uncomfortable, since Luz's personal conflict keeps disrupting their work environment. What started as a personal decision quickly becomes a problem that affects everyone around him. After Myne recovers from her illness, she goes back to the shop and learns something surprising. Benno is actually thinking about adopting Lodes as his son. His reasoning is practical, that if Lodes becomes part of his family, he can fully dedicate his life to the business without interference. Later, when Myne returns to the temple, she tries to focus on her accounting work with the head priest, but her mind keeps drifting back to Lodes' situation. Eventually, she tells him everything that has been happening, explaining the conflict between Lodes and his family and the idea of adoption. The head priest listens carefully and begins to think of a way to resolve the situation properly, rather than letting it continue to escalate. After considering the matter, the head priest suggests bringing Lo's parents to the cathedral so that everything can be discussed clearly and formally. Soon everyone involved, Lutz, his parents and Benno, is gathered together in the temple to talk things through. At first it seems like the meeting will simply confirm Lu's separation from his family, but the conversation takes an unexpected turn. It is revealed that Lu's parents were not entirely against his choices. Even though they did not agree with his path, they had quietly supported him because they wanted him to grow up strong and safe. Hearing this, Luz realizes how much he misunderstood their intentions and sincerely apologizes for his behavior and the distance he created. With this new understanding, Benno rethinks his plan. Instead of adopting Luz, he decides to change his contract into a legal contract, which allows Luz to continue working under him while still remaining part of his family. At the same time, Benno makes it clear that he intends to train Luce as his successor in the Merchant Guild, giving him a strong future without cutting him off from his roots. This solution satisfies everyone, as it balances Luce's ambitions with his family's wishes, and brings an end to the conflict that had been causing so much stress. In the end, Luce reunites with his family in a much more peaceful and understanding way. Watching everything come together, Myne feels an overwhelming sense of relief and begins to cry, happy that things did not fall apart. The tension that had been building finally disappears, replaced by a sense of closure and hope for the future. Seeing her emotional state, the head priest quietly offers her his handkerchief. When Myne notices the embroidery on it, she realizes that his real name is Ferdinand, a small but meaningful detail that reveals a more personal side of him and marks a subtle moment of trust between them. Myne learns that her mother Effa is pregnant, and the news fills her with a mix of excitement, happiness, and strong emotion. The idea of having a new baby in the family makes her feel warm and hopeful, and she immediately begins thinking about what she can do to make the moment special. Wanting to create something meaningful and lasting, she decides to make a picture book as a gift for the baby. This idea reflects both her deep love for books and the skills she has been steadily developing in creating them. In order to turn this plan into reality, she approaches Ferdinand and asks if she can take Wilma, a grey priestess known for her artistic talent, into her service as a retainer so that she can help with the illustrations. However, Ferdinand does not immediately support her idea. Instead, he redirects the conversation toward a more serious and practical concern. He explains that Myne should begin focusing on learning proper noble behavior, which includes refined skills such as playing the harpspiel, a stringed musical instrument. He goes on to warn her that because Myne is typically inherited through the mother's side, her high mind capacity will eventually draw the attention of nobles once she comes of age. In that society, having strong Myne is not only an advantage, but also something that can make her a valuable target, potentially limiting her freedom and choices. He emphasizes that learning noble etiquette and cultural skills is not optional but necessary, as it will help her protect herself and secure better treatment in the future. Following this discussion, Fran suggests that Rosina, a grey priestess who is highly skilled in music and was trained under Christine, would be an excellent choice to teach Myne how to play the harpspiel. Ferdinand then demonstrates a few basic notes on the instrument, and to his surprise, Myne is able to pick them up quickly, showing a natural sense of rhythm and ability. Rosina is then assigned to serve as Myne's tutor and retainer. However, it soon becomes clear that Rosina has a very different understanding of her role. She believes that as a music instructor, her position should place her above the other retainers, and she expects to be treated with greater status and respect. Because of this belief, she does not think she should be required to participate in the everyday duties that the other retainers carry out. This difference in expectations begins to create tension within the group, especially with Delia, who becomes increasingly frustrated and openly complains about Rosina's behavior. The imbalance in workload and attitude starts to disrupt the harmony among the retainers, making the situation difficult to ignore, and forcing Myne to step in and deal with the issue directly. In order to resolve the growing conflict, Myne calls a meeting and clearly explains her expectations. She presents Rosina with a firm and unavoidable choice. She can either fully accept the responsibilities of being a retainer, which includes contributing to the daily work while also teaching music, or she can return to the orphanage and give up her position entirely. Faced with this decision, Rosina ultimately chooses to stay and agrees to take on both roles. Over the next 10 days, Myne devotes herself fully to learning the harpspiel, practicing with focus and determination so that she can meet Ferdinand's expectations. With Rosina's guidance and instruction, she improves steadily and manages to learn and perform her first song. When the time comes for her to be evaluated, she performs successfully and earns Ferdinand's approval, demonstrating that she is capable of meeting the standards expected of her despite the challenges she faces. Later on, Rosina shares important information with Myne about Wilma. She explains that Wilma had a painful and traumatic experience in the past involving a blue priest who took advantage of her. This experience has left a lasting emotional impact on Wilma, making her deeply uncomfortable around adult men. Because of this, she prefers to remain within the girls' section of the orphanage and avoids situations that might bring back those difficult memories. Learning this helps Myne understand Wilma's behavior on a deeper level and gives her greater awareness of the emotional struggles that Wilma continues to carry. It also adds another layer of responsibility for Myne, as she continues to support, guide, and care for those under her leadership, while trying to create a safer and more understanding environment for everyone. Myne decides that she wants to create a children's version of the church's holy scriptures, so that her future baby sibling, as well as the orphans, can understand and enjoy them. She wants to turn something complicated and difficult into something simple, gentle, and easy to read. However, she quickly runs into a major problem. Ink is expensive and hard to get in large amounts, which makes printing books difficult. Instead of giving up, Myne comes up with her own solution. She decides to make ink herself using oil and soot collected from fireplaces in the town. It is not perfect, but it is affordable and practical, allowing her to continue working on her project without depending on limited resources. This idea once again shows her ability to adapt and find creative solutions when faced with limitations. After explaining her plan, Ferdinand gives his approval, and Myne moves forward with the next step. She asks Wilma, who is known for her artistic skill, to draw the illustrations for the book. Wilma carefully creates detailed and beautiful artwork, putting great effort into every part of the design. Myne then takes those drawings and carves them into wooden blocks so they can be used for printing. However, when they try to print the images, they realize that the level of detail does not transfer well onto the page. The fine lines and complexity are lost in the process, making the pictures unclear. This becomes another obstacle, forcing Myne to rethink her approach and find a method that works better for their situation. At the same time, Wilma is dealing with her own personal struggles. She is still affected by her past trauma and feels uneasy around men, which makes it difficult for her to fully participate in the printing process. When she is asked to come see the workshop where her drawings are turned into printed pages, she reacts strongly and accidentally lashes out at one of the orphan boys. This moment shows how deeply her past experiences still affect her behavior. Seeing this, Myne decides to change her printing method from woodblock printing to stencil printing, which requires simpler designs. She asks Wilma to adjust her artwork so it can be more easily used in this new process. Around this time, the orphans also mention to Myne that Wilma has been acting differently, which helps her understand that something more serious is going on beneath the surface. Wanting to make sure everything is appropriate before continuing, Myne asks Ferdinand to review the manuscript she has written for the children's version of the scriptures. When he reads it, he is immediately surprised and suspicious. He notices how easily she has simplified complex religious language into something clear and understandable for children, which is not something an ordinary person could do without extensive knowledge. Because of this, he calls her to his hidden room and questions her about her background, her education, and where she learned these ideas. Myne, unable to fully explain the truth, tells him that she can only describe it as knowledge she saw in a dreamlike world that she can no longer return to. While this does not fully answer his questions, it is the only explanation she can offer without revealing more than she should. In the end, Wilma manages to complete the illustrations, and in a significant step forward, she decides to come to the workshop to see the final stages of the book. This is an important moment for her, as she is choosing to face her fears and slowly overcome them. Together, Myne, the Grey Priests, and the orphans work as a team to print the pages, dry them, fold them, and assemble the book. Once everything is ready, Myne takes the completed pages home, where Tuli carefully binds them together, adding the final touches. After all the effort, challenges, and time spent, Myne finally holds a finished book in her hands. It has taken her 2 years since arriving in this new world, but she has finally achieved her goal of creating her very first book, marking a major milestone in her journey. While heading toward the library one day, Myne happens to run into a blue-robed priest who is widely known for being fiercely loyal to the high priest. Sensing that he could be trouble and not wanting to attract unnecessary attention, she calmly steps aside and allows him to pass without saying anything, making a deliberate effort to avoid any kind of confrontation. Her intention is simple, that she stays out of his way and keep things peaceful. However, the moment she finally arrives at the library, that brief sense of relief disappears completely. Instead of the quiet, orderly space she loves, she is met with complete chaos. The library has been thoroughly ransacked. Books are scattered across the floor, pages are torn and crumpled, and the shelves that once held everything neatly are left in total disarray. The sight hits her hard, and her emotions shift instantly from calm to anger. As she takes in the damage, her frustration begins to rise, and her thoughts quickly turn to the blue-robed priest she encountered earlier. It does not take long for her to suspect that he is responsible. The idea that someone would treat a place of knowledge with such disrespect fills her with a deep and intense anger, and she finds herself wanting to take immediate action. In that moment, she silently vows that whoever did this will not be allowed to get away with it. Before she can act on those feelings, Fran steps in without hesitation. Recognizing the dangerous mix of anger and impulse in her, he grabs her and firmly brings her to Ferdinand's office, insisting that she consult him first. Fran understands that acting without thinking could make the situation worse, and he wants Myne to approach the problem carefully and strategically, instead of reacting out of emotion. Although she is still upset, Myne begins to think more clearly as she calms down slightly. She starts to consider that instead of focusing only on revenge, she might be able to turn this situation into something productive. The destruction of the library, as frustrating as it is, also gives her a chance to rebuild it in a better and more organized way. With this new perspective, she returns to the library with her retainers and begins the long process of reorganizing everything. She uses a modified version of the Nippon decimal classification system, carefully sorting the books by genre, topic, and subject. The process requires patience and attention to detail, but as she works, the disorder slowly turns into structure, and her anger begins to settle. By the time the work is finished, the library is no longer chaotic but neatly arranged and easy to navigate. However, Myne soon notices something disappointing. The section she had set aside for magic books remains completely empty. Curious and somewhat frustrated, she asks Ferdinand about it. He brings her to his hidden room and questions her about the system she used, clearly intrigued by her method. She explains the ideas behind Melville Dewey and the Dewey Decimal System, which leaves Ferdinand confused since he has never heard of such concepts before. Then he reveals something that completely changes her expectations. Magic books are strictly restricted to nobles who have graduated from the Royal Academy, and as a blue priestess of commoner origin, she is not allowed to access them. This revelation is deeply disappointing for Myne, as her excitement about organizing and reading those books quickly fades, replaced by frustration at the limitations placed on her. At the same time, Lutz and Thule visit the orphanage and spend time teaching the children how to make books. The orphans show great interest in the process, watching closely and learning how to fold pages, bind them together and assemble complete books. Lutz and Thule guide them patiently, helping them understand each step. Later, Myne and Lutz bring one of the first completed copies of the children's Bible to Benno. As soon as he sees it, he immediately begins thinking about its potential as a product, and expresses interest in selling it for profit. Myne, however, refuses his suggestion. Her goal is to create meaningful literature that has purpose and value, not just something to be sold for money. Even so, she is aware that she still lacks the proper tools and resources needed to fully achieve her vision. As winter begins to approach, she plans to return home and continue working on making accessories for the orphanage, hoping to carry on her projects in a more comfortable environment. However, Ferdinand intervenes and reminds her that the annual temple dedication ceremony takes place during winter and requires a significant amount of mana. Because of this responsibility, he denies her request and insists that she remain at the temple so she can fulfill her duties properly. Despite this restriction, Myne still presents Ferdinand with a copy of her newly printed book. When he examines it, he begins to truly understand, perhaps for the first time, what printing actually represents. He realizes that this is not just a small invention but something that could completely transform how knowledge is shared and preserved in society. As he reflects on this, he becomes aware of just how significant Myne's abilities are. Her creativity, determination, and ideas have the potential to bring major change, and that realization also comes with a sense of concern. He understands that if her talents continue to develop without limits, they could challenge the existing order in ways that others may not be ready to accept. Although Ferdinand firmly insists that Myne must remain at the temple throughout the winter season, he does provide one small but meaningful concession. He allows her family to visit her from time to time so they can check on her condition and reassure themselves that she is safe. Taking advantage of this, Myne carefully explains the situation to her family, telling them in clear terms that she will be staying at the temple during the winter months in order to fulfill her responsibilities. Their reaction is far from positive. Gunther in particular reacts strongly, showing visible frustration and concern. He is clearly upset at the thought of being separated from her, and deeply worried about her safety in an environment he does not fully trust. The rest of the family also struggles to accept the situation, and there is a sense of hesitation and unease as they question whether such an arrangement is truly necessary. Myne, however, remains patient and composed as she explains her reasoning. She reminds them that the temple is the very place that allowed her to survive when she was at her weakest, providing her with protection and care when she needed it the most. She explains that staying at the temple is not simply a choice but something that allows her to continue living and improving herself. She also speaks about her responsibilities toward the children in the orphanage, emphasizing that her work there has real meaning and cannot simply be abandoned. Gradually, as they listen to her explanation, her family begins to understand her perspective. Their resistance softens, and after some discussion and continued concern, they reluctantly accept her decision. Even though they are not entirely happy with it, they acknowledge that her responsibilities are important, and that she must carry them out. In the end, they leave with a mix of worry and acceptance, trusting that she will remain safe and continue to grow, even if it means being apart from them during the winter. As the eve of Schutzarea approaches and signals the end of autumn, Myne shifts her focus back to her duties at the temple. She begins working on a new picture book, carefully planning every detail of it so that it will be both educational and enjoyable for children. She spends time thinking about the illustrations and the text, wanting to ensure that the final result is something meaningful. While she is deeply absorbed in this work, Fran reminds her that she must also prepare for an upcoming responsibility involving the Knights Order, a highly respected group from the nobles' quarter of Ehrenfest. This preparation is not simple or optional. She must memorize specific prayers, complete her ceremonial robes properly, and mentally prepare herself for the role she is expected to play. As she continues her preparations, Ferdinand returns from the Harvest Festival and briefly checks in before being interrupted by urgent news. A message arrives requesting immediate assistance from the Knights Order for a raid, and it also requires a blessing to support the knights in battle. The sudden urgency changes the atmosphere completely, turning what was a calm period of preparation into a tense and rushed situation where everyone must act quickly and efficiently. Once she is fully dressed and ready, Myne meets Ferdinand again. This time, he is no longer dressed as a priest but as a knight, wearing armor and prepared to fight alongside the Knight's Order. He gives her a magic ring, explaining that it will enhance the power of her prayers and blessings. Together they leave the cathedral through the main gate, stepping out of the familiar safety of the temple and heading toward the nobles' quarter where the knights are waiting. The moment feels heavy with anticipation, and Myne experiences a mixture of nervousness and determination as she approaches her first real assignment outside the temple. When they arrive, they are greeted by Karstedt, the captain of the Knight's Order, who quickly provides instructions before the group takes flight toward a massive trom that is causing destruction in the area. To ensure that Myne remains safe while carrying out her role, she is assigned 2 guards, Damul and Shikikoza, who are responsible for protecting her as she performs her prayers. As they move toward the battlefield, the tension continues to build. In the middle of this, Shikikoza openly mocks her, dismissing her prayers as useless and showing clear disrespect for her role. This moment sets the tone for what lies ahead, marking the beginning of Myne's first real challenge in a dangerous situation where she must rely on her abilities while being judged by experienced knights around her. Shikikoza wastes no time in criticizing Myne, immediately mocking her for using her mana on what he dismisses as a useless blessing. He sneers openly, making it clear that he believes her efforts are pointless and that her actions will have no real impact on the outcome of the battle. His words hit harder than expected, causing Myne's confidence to waver for a brief moment. She begins to doubt herself, wondering if she truly made a mistake. However, before that doubt can settle in, Damul steps forward and speaks calmly to her. He explains in a steady and reassuring tone that even a single prayer can influence the flow of mana in ways that are not always visible, and that such blessings can in fact support the knights during combat. His explanation helps ground her, giving her something solid to hold on to. Slowly her nerves settle, and she gathers herself again, deciding that it is better to remain composed than to react emotionally. Wanting to avoid creating further tension, she apologizes politely to Shikikoza, expressing regret for what he considers overstepping. Shikikoza accepts it in a dismissive manner, letting the issue drop on the surface, though the cold look he continues to give her makes it clear that his opinion of her has not changed at all. As the battle against the Trom continues to unfold, the Knight's Order presses forward with coordinated force. They wield their mana-infused weapons with precision, striking the massive plant repeatedly and weakening it bit by bit. The intensity of the fight is clear, yet there is also a sense of discipline in how they move. Damul takes the opportunity to explain more to Myne, describing how the enchanted weapons function and how mana is channeled through them to increase their effectiveness. As he speaks, his attention shifts to Ferdinand, and there is a note of admiration in his voice. He points out how effortlessly Ferdinand seems to control both his sword and his magic, making the dangerous battle look almost smooth and controlled despite the chaos around them. Lowering his voice slightly, he admits that he wishes Ferdinand could return to the Knight's Order permanently, though he quickly realizes he may have said too much. He apologizes and asks Myne not to repeat his words, clearly aware of the boundaries he may have crossed. This moment of honesty, along with the clear respect the knights have for Ferdinand, gives Myne a small but noticeable boost in confidence, helping her focus more steadily on supporting the fight with her blessings. Gradually, the tide of the battle begins to shift in favor of the knights, but the tension does not disappear. Instead, it takes on a different form. When Shikikoza notices Damul speaking casually with Myne, his reaction is immediate and sharp. He reprimands Damul harshly, accusing him of being too familiar with someone he considers a mere commoner. Damul is visibly taken aback, clearly not having realized that the blue-robed shrine maiden he had been speaking to was viewed this way within the rigid hierarchy of the order. Myne, sensing the tension escalating, attempts to apologize once again, hoping to smooth things over. However, before she can finish, Shikikoza lashes out violently. He grabs her by the hair with force and threatens her, raising a knife and making it clear that he is willing to harm her. The situation turns dangerous in an instant. Both Damul and Fran move quickly to intervene, but Damul is forced to hesitate. His lower rank prevents him from openly opposing Shikikoza, leaving him trapped between his duty and his desire to protect her. In the middle of this chaos, Myne's situation becomes even worse. The Trombo, already dangerous, begins to react to the disturbance. Thick, twisting vines surge forward and wrap tightly around her, trapping her in place. She struggles against the plant, but its grip is too strong and it continues to tighten around her. Desperate, she looks up and spots Ferdinand in the sky behind Shikikoza, calling out to him for help. She hopes he will reach her in time. However, in the confusion of the moment, Ferdinand's blade strikes her by accident. The injury is not intentional, but it has immediate consequences. As her blood falls to the ground, a second Tromb emerges, drawn to the energy in it, and begins to grow rapidly, wrapping around her even more tightly. Fern rushes forward without hesitation, putting himself at risk to try to protect her, while Damuel attempts to cast a blessing on his weapon so he can intervene. His efforts, however, are disrupted by the ongoing tension and Shikikoza's interference. In her panic, Myne calls out to Luz through the magical ring, and a beam of light shoots upward into the sky. At that very moment, across the city, Luz experiences a sudden vision of her struggle. He feels her fear and desperation, yet also her determination to survive, leaving him shaken and unable to do anything but watch from afar. Ferdinand arrives fully at the scene and quickly takes in what is happening. He realizes almost immediately that his usual attacks will not work because the trombe is feeding on Myne's blood, using it to strengthen itself. Understanding this, he abandons his standard approach and changes his strategy entirely. Instead of attacking the plant directly, he focuses on Myne first. He heals her wound, cutting off the source of energy that is fueling the trombe's growth. With that connection severed, the plant weakens. He then gives clear instructions to the knights, directing them to carefully cut down the trombe while ensuring that Myne is not harmed in the process. With coordinated effort, they manage to destroy it. Once the immediate danger has passed, Ferdinand gives Myne a recovery potion, allowing her to regain the mana she lost and stabilize her condition so she can continue. After the battle ends, the knights gather to discuss the events that took place. An open interrogation is conducted to determine responsibility for the incident and to understand how the situation escalated to such a dangerous point. Shikikoza refuses to defend himself, stating bluntly that a noble does not need to justify his actions toward a commoner. His refusal creates an uncomfortable atmosphere. Damuel hesitates, clearly struggling with whether to speak, knowing that Shikikoza outranks him and that speaking out could have consequences. At this point, Myne steps forward and asks Ferdinand and Karstedt directly whether her safety can be guaranteed if she speaks honestly. Receiving their assurance, she chooses to proceed. Encouraged by her courage, Damuel also steps forward and apologizes, admitting that he failed to protect her as he should have. In the end, Ferdinand, as the highest-ranking knight present, delivers the final judgment. He speaks firmly, emphasizing that everyone must understand their place and responsibilities within the structure of their society. He points out that the knights, by failing to properly protect Myne as they had been ordered to do, have effectively gone against the will of the Lord of Ehrenfest himself. His words carry weight, and even Karstedt, as the knight commander, is held accountable for the failure of oversight. As they begin to move toward the center of the crater, Ferdinand turns his attention back to Myne. He instructs her clearly to put all of her power into the upcoming ritual, explaining that he has already prepared a plan to ensure that she will succeed. His tone is steady, offering both guidance and reassurance, making it clear that despite everything that has happened, she now has the support she needs to fulfill her role properly. As a form of punishment for Shikikoza's failure during the battle, Ferdinand assigns him the responsibility of leading the healing ritual that is meant to restore the land damaged by the trombe. This is not a simple task, and the pressure on him is obvious. When he begins, it quickly becomes clear that he is struggling. He fumbles with the magic, fails to properly control it, and is unable to produce the results that are expected from someone in his position. The ritual does not progress as it should, and the atmosphere grows tense as everyone watches him fall short. Eventually, the responsibility has no choice but to shift to Myne. She steps forward, not entirely confident, but still determined to try. Despite her hesitation, once she begins, everything changes. She performs the ritual with remarkable precision and strength, far beyond what anyone present had anticipated. Even Ferdinand, who is rarely surprised, is caught off guard by just how well she executes it. The knights stand in stunned silence as the land begins to recover under her control, witnessing something they clearly did not expect from her. Recognizing both the significance of what just happened and the attention it draws, Ferdinand immediately makes it clear to the Knight's Order that Myne is under his direct custody and protection. His warning is firm and unmistakable, leaving no room for misunderstanding that she is not to be harmed or mistreated in any way. As they make their way back to the city of Ehrenfest, Ferdinand offers her an apology, admitting that he should have ensured her safety more carefully, and that allowing her to come to harm under his watch was a failure on his part. When they finally return to the temple, Ferdinand formally asks Myne what kind of compensation or reparations she would like for everything she went through. Myne, rather than making any extreme or emotional demands, responds calmly and thoughtfully. She asks for a new set of ceremonial robes from the Gilberta Company, since the ones she had been wearing were damaged during the incident. In addition to that, she makes a second request, asking Karstedt, the Knight Commander, to show leniency toward Damuel. She explains that despite his lower rank and the limitations placed on him, he genuinely tried to protect her, and she believes that effort should be acknowledged rather than punished. After leaving the temple, she is met outside by Lutz, who had felt her distress through their magical connection even from across the city. The moment he sees her, the tension that she had been holding in finally breaks. She rushes to him, hugs him tightly, and bursts into tears, releasing all the fear, stress, and exhaustion that she had been carrying since the battle. In the days that follow, the strain of everything she experienced catches up to her, and Myne ends up bedridden for several days as she recovers both physically and mentally from the ordeal. By the time she is able to return to the temple, the season has reached the end of autumn. Not long after her return, Ferdinand calls her to his hidden room once again. There, he gives her a red potion to drink. She notices that it has a surprisingly sweet taste, which stands out as a small moment of comfort after everything she has been through. After that, he places a circlet on her head, and she gradually falls into a deep, magically induced sleep. While she is in this state, Ferdinand uses a special magical tool to look into her memories. At first, the experience startles her, but instead of resisting, she quickly accepts it and begins guiding him through her memories on her own terms. She shows him her past life as Urano Motosu, sharing the moments that mattered most to her, especially her deep love for books and the life she lived with her family in Japan. As she revisits these memories, she is confronted with the more painful parts of her past as well, particularly her complicated relationship with her mother. The emotions tied to those memories rise to the surface, and feelings of regret and sadness begin to overwhelm her, leaving her emotionally exposed. Because Ferdinand is directly connected to her mind and emotions during this process, he experiences everything alongside her. The intensity of her feelings becomes too much for him to handle, and he is forced to abruptly end the connection, bringing both of them back to the present. When Myne wakes up, she immediately notices that Ferdinand looks visibly shaken, affected by what he had just experienced. Without hesitation, she hugs him tightly and thanks him, expressing her gratitude for allowing her to reconnect with memories that she had been afraid of losing over time. Later on, Ferdinand meets with Karstedt to discuss what he learned from seeing her memories. He explains that Myne holds immense value to Ehrenfest, not only because of her abilities, but also because of the knowledge and perspective she carries. He emphasizes that she is someone who must be protected carefully, as her existence could have a major impact on the future. Because of this, he asks Karstedt to take steps toward formally adopting her, ensuring that she has the protection and status necessary to keep her safe from any threats that may arise. Back at home, Myne spends time quietly with each member of her family, taking a moment to thank them one by one for their support and care. She reflects on everything she has been through and realizes that while she can never return to her previous life or fully make up for the things she regrets, especially when it comes to her mother, she still has an opportunity in this world to appreciate the family she has now. This realization brings her a sense of comfort and resolve. The next day, she returns to the temple and resumes her daily life. She attends a music lesson with Rosina, continuing her efforts to improve herself, while Gil and the orphans continue working together to create new books. Through their efforts, the environment she helped build continues to grow, carrying forward her vision of learning, creativity, and care. That concludes the anime recap. As always, if you enjoyed, let me know down below and I'm out.